Hi, it's Makaela here. Thanks for listening to my podcast. What you're about to listen to is an old episode of my podcast, The Midlife Awakening, which has now been replaced with the Deliberately Transformed Woman podcast. You'll still find some golden takeaways in these old episodes, but if you're the type of person who wants to discover and let go of the things that are holding you back in life by busting through fear and procrastination, overcoming imposter syndrome, and stepping into a life that is fulfilling, courageous, and intentional, then my new podcast episodes, starting from episode 21, are the ones you're looking for. You're listening to episode 9 of the Midlife Awakening podcast with Makaela Moore. Welcome to the Midlife Awakening podcast. I'm Makaela Moore, your host and certified transformation coach. I'm a 40-something woman who nerds out on brain science and believes every woman should be financially independent. This podcast is for women navigating their midlife who want to learn the secrets to unlocking their brain and freeing themselves from everything that holds them back so they can create lasting change in their lives, because everything is possible. Join me each week for conversations about the midlife and tips and tricks to hack your subconscious brain so you can deliberately transform your life and ultimately create your own financial security. First time here? Hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Enjoy! Welcome to episode 9. I'm not even quite sure where to begin this week. I feel like I'm still recovering, but also having withdrawals from the weekend. If you tuned in last week, you would have heard me saying that I was about to head off on a 4-day Women in Business retreat run by Angela Henderson. Well, I did, and it was unbelievable. Hands down, the best conference or retreat I have ever been to. To be fair though, it was far less conferencey and way more retreaty than anything I've been to before. But I met so many amazing women in business who are just totally kicking ass in their business, and they're out there impacting thousands or collectively millions of other people daily. It was just so inspiring. I've walked away from the retreat feeling all the feels. First up, I'm still tired and I feel like I'm catching up on sleep. Not because I lacked sleep on the weekend, because I actually did sleep fairly well there, surprisingly, but because our brains were just so full that it's taking time for it all to just assimilate and settle into my brain. It's a bit like when, Brisbane floods. It all takes a bit of time for all the water to settle down. Well, that's exactly what happened to all of our brains on the weekend. Then mix in with that all the personal breakthroughs that, everyone had there, and afterwards, I think everyone in that room they cried at one point or another. I know I did several times. And I've walked away from that retreat with a full head, a super full heart, and I just met so many beautiful women, and I've just made some really lovely new friends, and it just feels amazing. The big thing for me, though, was the confidence that I walked away with. This really took me by surprise. So you see, every single other conference that I've ever been to, regardless of the size, I have let my introverted brain dictate how I would show up and how I would act or react. I would use my introvert status as an excuse to not engage fully. I'd go and eat lunches on my own, so that I didn't have to engage with people, or at least that's what I thought. What I have now realised is that I did that so that no one would find out that I was a big fat imposter in the room and that I didn't belong there. This was something I discovered about myself this weekend. At every other conference, I would try to find, 1 or 2 people to stick to, and then I wouldn't mingle. My excuse was just always that I hated networking and that it wasn't my thing. But I'm now realising that was just all a story I'd created in my head. The last conference I went to was early September down in Melbourne. There was about 300 or 400 women there, and I actually think I've even mentioned this one in a previous podcast episode. There were dinners and cocktail parties each night, and I chose, as I always do, to not go. I did what I always do and I retreated to my hotel room because that's what introverts do. And it's also what I do when I'm feeling lazy or insecure or imposterish. And looking back, it is a definite pattern for me. But this weekend was completely different, and I showed up in a way that I've never shown up before. And it felt really, really good. I think it was a combination of a different style of conference, but more it was the changes in me that have been happening as I go through my own transformation. I had connected with one beautiful soul through socials, and so at least when I turned up, I had my person. And we arrived in the afternoon, Thursday afternoon, and our first night was a group dinner. And I was still a bit kind of shy and awkward, but I happily chatted with everyone at the end, at my end of the table, and I got to know some more beautiful ladies. And then the next morning, which was day one of the 3 conference days, we discovered when we walked in that it was allocated seating and we had to go and find our name on a table. I wasn't seated with my buddy, which forced me to go and meet new people. And it was a good start, to be honest, and a very good thing that just pushed me out of my comfort zone. We did a speed dating exercise, which whilst super loud and most people lost their voices by about halfway through this hour-long exercise, it allowed me to connect with more people. We also had guest speakers at the event, and there was one seated at each of the 8 or 9 tables in the room. And these guest speakers were very successful women in their own businesses, and some of them, fairly high profile in the social media and online entrepreneurial worlds. I didn't previously know the guest speaker that was at my table on day 1, but I did get to know her. I put myself out there and I spoke to her. I soaked up all her knowledge and advice and her wisdom. In the lunch break that day, I went and sat next to another woman who has been my business idol for about 5 years, and we chatted like old friends. I was totally fangirling, by the way. Days 2 and 3, I did the same. I went and sat next to a guest speaker and just struck up a conversation while we ate, and I soaked up all their business goodness. Even in the morning tea breaks, I'd go and find one of the speakers and just chat with them. They were all so very giving of their own personal time and space during those breaks, and so very generous in sharing their knowledge and their wisdom, retelling stories of when they first started and what did or didn't work for them. I also made so many new friends amongst the attendees. I put myself out there in a way that I have never done before, because I've always had an excuse not to, or a story why I shouldn't or couldn't. In the past, I would not have gone up to any one of these guest speakers and struck up a conversation with them, because I never felt good enough or smart enough, advanced in my business enough, all those sorts of things. As for having a selfie with them, I never would have done that. But I did this weekend. I have selfies with most of the guest speakers, and to be honest, not only are they now following me on Instagram, but I've become personal Facebook friends with many of them now too. So on my drive home to Brisbane from the Gold Coast on Sunday afternoon after the retreat finally finished, naturally I was reflecting on the weekend. I was feeling like my cup was totally full. I felt so proud of myself. I felt liked and I felt accepted. I felt motivated and confident. A stark contrast to leaving any other conference where my thoughts usually went to the regret of having wasted my time and money. This one was very different though. I immersed myself in this retreat, soaking up every bit of information, advice, ideas, and inspiration possible, and reveling in my newfound friendships. The theme of the retreat was Choose to Shine, And that is exactly what I did in my own way. I stopped worrying about whether I was or wasn't good enough to be in that room. Instead, I just connected with women of all ages, at all stages of business, and of all different skill sets. I left my fear of judgment at the door, and instead of worrying about whether I looked good enough to be there, I was just present and enjoyed the moment, and I got to know these beautiful women. I disregarded my imposter syndrome, and I owned who I am, what I do, and how passionate I am about my business and my mission in life. I just owned it all. I showed up as me, warts and all. While some others dressed up, I turned up in my jeans, a t-shirt and my Birkenstocks. And I was comfortable. At the cocktail party, while other people wore heels with their dresses, I actually wore sneakers, and I was comfortable. I made a huge choice, and it was basically go big or go home. It was to be present, to make the most of the entire weekend and all that it had to offer. It was to connect as much for myself as for my business, and also to offer my advice to others where I could. And I did. Ladies there were actually interested in what I had to say and what I do. I was actually seen and heard. And for a change, I didn't feel invisible. I've talked before about how I always felt that I didn't belong places, and just how that came to be a story in my subconscious brain. The experience I've had at previous conference-style events has always been that I didn't belong. But you know what? I always belonged there. It was only me who was convincing myself of that through those rose-coloured glasses of confirmation bias. The old cycle of what I call the unbelonging. I believe I don't belong, therefore I act in a way that says I don't belong, so therefore I don't belong, and I perceive everyone's actions to confirm that. And I end up in a perpetual cycle of not belonging because that was the story in my head. But not this time. I belonged at this retreat. Not only because I paid to be there and I turned up just like everyone else, but because I created a new belief for myself. And that was that I belonged there. This one simple new belief, and I had a completely different experience from any other I've had in the past. Honestly, I felt like I had finally found my people. Not only had I found my people, but I had also found a brand new confidence that I never even knew existed within me. Confidence is a really funny thing. It's a feeling, but it's also an identity trait. One of my coaches describes confidence in this way. She says it instructs people how to think of you. If you show people that you're well-liked and highly regarded, they're likely to follow suit. Teach people how to treat you. If you treat yourself well and you show this through confidence, you are essentially setting a boundary and telling them how to treat you, as well as what you will and won't tolerate. If you're confident, you're more likely to like yourself. So by liking yourself, you're subconsciously showing people that you're likable and you're instructing them to like you. If someone else likes something, you'll probably like it too. And this is the same principle. If I'm showing up with confidence and I'm liking myself, then you'll probably like me too. We need to speak about ourselves with respect and positivity and not negativity. Self-confidence makes it easy for people like us because we are showing them that we are easy to like. Confidence also suggests leadership, and humans are like pack animals. We crave leadership. When confident leaders are setting the way, we follow our leaders. We listen and we follow, and we try to emulate our leaders. People need someone to follow, and if we're demonstrating self-confidence, which is a good sign of leadership, then people will follow and trust us. And this puts people at ease and instills confidence. We love to be around people who make us feel better, and confident people exude positivity that is attractive endearing themselves to others. Self-confident people have positive thoughts about themselves, which in turn creates positive thoughts towards others. Self-confident people don't feel the need to put others down or to judge others to feel good about themselves, and they are actually a joy to be around. A stark contrast to arrogant people who think they're better than everyone else. Confidence is based on our mindset and the way we think. The difference between confidence and self-confidence is that confidence is specific to like a practiced skill or talent, like being confident at cooking or writing or parenting. But self-confidence is an overall mindset about your overall ability in all areas of life that matter to you. So if we talk about confidence in the kitchen, it's not about knowing every single thing that there is to know about the food and the recipes and the appliances, etc. It's about having the skills and the knowledge to cook the meals and to improvise and to solve problems as they arise or burn. Self-confidence is really about emotion. We don't know how to do everything, but we know how to handle our own mindset and our own emotions. Confident people usually have a future-based mindset and they're not stuck in the past. They're focused on moving forward and continuous improvement and self-development, and they're just confident in their own abilities to solve problems as they come up. As I talked about in last week's episode, we can create and control our feelings through our thoughts, and if we can learn how to sit with any negative emotion and not resist it, the easier they are to handle when they do pop up. When you have self-confidence, you can create amazing success because you're willing to keep going and you have the ability to handle any negative emotion and keep going. You may recall that I'm in a podcast mastermind. After returning from the retreat, I was inside our Voxer group catching up on some of the goings-on inside the mastermind, and my mentor Carly had left a voice message for the whole group. She was talking about a one-on-one coaching call that she'd had with one of the group members last week, and it turned out it was actually my call she was talking about. So in the call, she asked me what I was getting out of podcasting. I must admit, until she asked that question, I hadn't given it a great deal of thought. I just knew that I liked doing it, and I knew it was helping me to put myself out there and at least be heard. Our call was the day before I left to go to the retreat, and to be honest, so much of what we spoke about was momentarily forgotten in the excitement of the weekend. But in listening to her Voxer message yesterday, I'm super glad that she reflected my thoughts and feelings back to the group, and obviously back to me. So when she asked what I'd learned, what I was getting out of the podcast or what I loved about it, this is actually what I told her in my call. And it was that podcasting has changed so much for me, because I'm finally putting myself out there. It's given me confidence to speak my truth, and it's reducing and eliminating my imposter syndrome. It's also allowing me to overcome my perfectionist tendencies. I have to say that hearing her say my own words back to me had quite a profound effect. Like hearing it from her made it really true or something. And it is, because doing this podcast has been wonderful for me in so many ways. I've developed a deeper confidence within myself and I trust myself more. And I'm learning that people do want to listen to me and that I do have valuable knowledge to share. By doing the podcast, I have gained confidence at doing it. But before we can actually do anything, we first need the confidence to start with. You've got to have the self-confidence before you create the success, which comes back to being the identity of the person that we want to become. So it is a bit of a cycle. And self-confidence fuels action. If you're not taking action, it's because you're not generating the feeling of self-confidence. And that starts with a thought, which could simply be, I can handle this, or what's the worst that can happen, or I've totally got this. I know going into that retreat last week, my thoughts were not that I was going to hide or be invisible like I always used to do. They were of connection, meeting and connecting with beautiful people and soaking in all the goodness of the weekend. And that is exactly what I did, one person at a time. But I had to put myself out there, and I had to introduce myself to people and engage in conversation for that to actually happen. And I haven't previously had the confidence to do that. I always hid in the background. I have developed so much more confidence since launching this podcast, but I first had to have the confidence to do it and to put myself out there. And the only way I did that was to believe that I could do it and to trust that it would work out, knowing that I could totally stuff it up and that if I did, that would be okay too. People will judge us for how we show up, but they're going to judge us whether we show up confidently or negatively or not at all. They will judge us whether we succeed or fail. So we've got to forget about judgment. We've got to get that fear of judgment out of our head. And we've just got to go forth and do the thing with confidence. The other thing about confidence is that it doesn't make us better than anyone else, because no one is better. We're all just equal. So long as you're better than the person you were yesterday, then you're moving in the right direction. That's all I've got for this week. As part of building my confidence though, I am doing more regular Insta story videos, so it would be great if you could jump on over to my Instagram page at makaela.more and show your support. Thanks for listening. I'll speak to you next week. And that, my beautiful friends, is another episode of the Midlife Awakening. If you'd like more inspiration or to connect with other midlifers, head on over to my Facebook group, Deliberately Transformed. You'll find the link in the show notes. Until next time, cheers.